Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to break down the incredible, microscopic journey that happens every time you decide to move. We're talking about that split-second trip from a simple thought in your brain to a physical action, like just lifting your hand. It's an amazing story of electricity, chemistry, and just perfect timing.
Okay, so here's our game plan. We're going to start with the big picture, how that command even gets sent. Then we'll zoom right in on the critical meeting point between nerve and muscle. After that, we'll see how the message actually gets passed along, how that little spark ignites a whole muscle contraction, and finally, what happens when this whole delicate communication system breaks down.
So let's kick things off with that first fundamental question. How does an idea in your head turn into a real, physical movement?
I mean, it feels instant, doesn't it? You think it, you do it. But it all kicks off with an electrical command from these huge nerve cells called motor neurons, which are tucked away deep in your spinal cord. You can think of them as the master controllers, the ones sending out the orders.
And that signal doesn't just go to one place. It travels down this nerve fiber that acts like a main cable, splitting off into hundreds of tiny little wires. This system is just ridiculously efficient. It means a single command can get a whole group of muscle fibers to move together in perfect sync.
Okay, now we're going to zoom way in. We're talking microscopic level. Let's look at the most critical point in this whole process, that tiny spot where the nervous message finally gets handed off to the muscle.
This whole area is called the neuromuscular junction. And really, it's like a high-security checkpoint between your nervous system and your muscular system. It's where that electrical signal from the nerve has to get converted into a chemical one. The whole setup, right there, is known as the motor end plate.
And here's what's really wild. The nerve and the muscle don't even touch. There's this tiny gap between them, only about 20 to 30 nanometers wide. You can imagine this little gap, the synaptic cleft, as a kind of moat that the signal has to cross. And it's right there, in that little space, that all the magic really happens.
Now, the nerve ending comes totally prepared for this mission. It's packed with mitochondria, which are like little power plants providing all the energy. And, super important, it's holding about 300,000 of these tiny bubbles or vesicles. Each and every one is just crammed with thousands of molecules of a chemical messenger called acetylcholine.
All right, let's get to the action. How does that signal actually make the leap across the moat? Well, this is where we get what you might call a chemical handshake.
It's this beautiful, super fast, four-step chain reaction. First, the electrical nerve impulse arrives at the end of the line. This arrival pops open these special gates for calcium ions. Calcium floods in, and that acts as the trigger. It pulls about 125 of those pre-packed vesicles to the very edge of the nerve, where they merge with the membrane and just dump all their acetylcholine into that synaptic cleft.
And the precision here is just wow. These acetylcholine molecules are like tiny keys. They float across that tiny gap and find their perfect match, specialized protein receptors on the muscle fiber that act like locks. And it's no accident. These locks are positioned perfectly, right across from where the keys get released.
So, when the acetylcholine key turns in the receptor lock, it opens up a channel. And this creates a perfect storm for sodium ions to rush in. Why? Well, for two big reasons. First, there's a ton more sodium outside the muscle than inside. And second, the inside of the muscle is negatively charged. So when that gate swings open, those positively charged sodium ions are both pushed by chemistry and pulled by electricity to just flood into the muscle fiber.
And this sudden, massive flood of positive sodium ions, that is the moment we've been building up to. It's the spark. It's what finally ignites the muscle and tells it to contract.
This first rush of sodium creates this local electrical jolt called the end plate potential. Now, if that jolt is strong enough, if it hits a certain threshold, it triggers a brand new, full-blown electrical signal called an action potential. And that signal sweeps across the entire muscle fiber, making the whole thing contract.
But wait, what stops the muscle from just contracting forever? Well, as soon as the message has been delivered, a cleanup crew gets right to work. There's an enzyme called acetylcholine esterase that instantly swoops in and just destroys all the leftover acetylcholine in the gap. And this is absolutely critical. It lets the muscle relax and get ready for the next command.
So, our body's pretty smart. It doesn't leave something this important to chance. It actually has a high safety factor built in. Every single nerve impulse releases about 3 times the amount of acetylcholine that's actually needed to make a muscle contract. It's just to make absolutely sure the signal gets through every single time.
And this whole system just brilliantly illustrates how essential and how delicate this process is, especially when you see what happens when it gets disrupted, either by poisons or by disease. You can target this one little junction in a few different ways, and the results are dramatic. The poison curare, for example, it blocks the locks, so the key can't get in, the message is never received, and you get paralysis. Botulinum toxin, on the other hand, prevents the key from even being released. And then you have something like nerve gas, which takes out the cleanup crew, so the message just keeps firing over and over, leading to severe, uncontrollable muscle spasms.
And it's not just things from the outside. In the autoimmune disease myasthenia gravis, a person's own immune system tragically attacks and destroys its own acetylcholine receptors, its own locks. As more locks disappear, that initial electrical jolt just gets weaker and weaker until it's not strong enough to start the contraction anymore. This leads to profound, severe muscle weakness.
So when you really step back and look at the whole thing, it's just this stunningly complex ballet, right? A thought becomes an electrical signal, that signal triggers a precise chemical handshake, and that handshake creates a new electrical spark that powers our every single move. And all of this is happening in milliseconds, thousands of times a minute, without you even thinking about it.
It is an incredible, invisible world of communication happening inside you, constantly. It really makes you wonder, right? What other amazing biological machines are humming away perfectly, right now, just to keep you going? That's something to think about next time you simply lift a finger.